Hello, I'm presenting on behalf of Oleksii Kozhanov, ICC Ukraine's Vice President for Digitalization and Digital Transformation, and I will be taking you through this presentation on the digitalization of international trade. The presentation will cover the topic of digitalization from a high level. Therefore, I won't go into specific examples. However, we will make available an excellent paper published by ICC United Kingdom, Seizing the Moment, Unleashing the Potential of International Trade, where you will be able to read 16 case studies. As will be explained further into the presentation, the United Kingdom plays a particularly important role in the development of digitalization of international trade, simply due to the fact that about 75% of world trade is covered by documents subject to English law. It is also for this reason that the ICC United Kingdom is so heavily involved in the development of standards that relate to the digitalization of international trade. First, let's look at the benefits that digitalization brings to the table, so that we can understand why there is all this fuss and why it is worth the undoubted hassle of changing existing systems and procedures. Digitization and digitalization. Is there a difference and does it matter? Legal issues and their impact on digitalizations. What are we aiming for? The importance of MLETR. MLETR aligned schemes. Which countries are ahead of the game? Where does Ukraine stand on MLETR and digitalization? Finally, we will try to draw some conclusions regarding the road ahead for the digitalization of international trade. Okay, let's get started. So, why all the fuss? What benefits can be derived from the digitalization of international trade? Well, looking at these benefits you can appreciate the positive economic impact on international trade. They also explain why these developments are completely non-political. Although there are undoubtedly challenges and difficulties in implementing new digital systems and they do require investment. However, there is no economic bloc or political entity that is against these developments. It is one of the very few areas where global cooperation genuinely exists. Furthermore, even if there were, no single country could stop the rest of the world benefiting from these developments. If you doubt these figures, then I would refer you to the ICC document that I mentioned previously. It will be made available for download from the exhibition hall after the close of the auditorium. So now, let's quickly have a look at the difference between digitization and digitalization. Is there a difference between digitization and digitalization? And does it matter? Well, both terms are used sometimes as if there is just the one meaning, but there is a difference. Digitization is the process of converting a paper document into a digital file. Digitalization, on the other hand, is the process of using digitized data to convert manual business processes through the use of digital technologies. So, imagine that a bill of lading has been converted electronically to create a digital template. This is digitization. This digitized bill of lading is then completed online and then forwarded electronically to a bank to support a request for trade finance, instead of being completed in paper format and posted to the bank. This is the digitalization of that process. You will see that this differentiation is important, especially when considering the relevant legal status of the digitized document and the operational feasibility of involving different parties in a digitalized process. Having touched on a legal consideration, let's now look at the key legal issue that has to be resolved, many times over. As I mentioned on the previous slide, it is true that digitization and digitalization are simply technology issues. However, the legal status of digitized trade documents is fundamental. There is little sense in digitizing documents and them not having the same legal status as the paper documents. As laws relating to trade documentation, bills of lading and exchange, promissory notes, etc., were written largely in the 19th century, they often refer to ownership of paper and physical signatures. Therefore, to give their digital equivalents the same standing, it is necessary to change multiple laws in multiple jurisdictions. This takes time and also careful thought as to how to ensure that the digitized documents have the same properties as their paper equivalents, especially in relation to the concept of ownership of a document. If this cannot be achieved, there is no benefit. In fact, there could be extra costs associated with digitizing these documents. So, what needs to be done to enable the digitizing of trade documentation? We'll look at what we are trying to achieve on the next slide. For digitized documents to have the same standing as their paper equivalents, trade law should support all appropriate aspects of e-commerce. This means recognizing both paper and digitized documents as equal legal instruments. However, in individual cases, it has to be one or the other. You can't have a paper bill of lading and a digitized one. Digitized documents also have to be recognized in all the jurisdictions where a trade is taking place. It's a mammoth task, but the good news is that work has been going on for more than 30 years at the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law. Of particular importance is the Model Law on Electronic Transferable Records 2017, MLETR. So what is MLETR? And how does it help? We'll have a look at this on the next slide. Under this model law, the electronic equivalent of paper-based transferable documents are defined as electronic transferable records subject to the conditions set out in this slide. The law also requires that a reliable method, judged against a set of standards, be used to determine that these conditions have been met. The law also tries to address the issue of cross-border effectiveness. The good news is that the laws of many countries are now being aligned to MLETR principles. English law is also being used as a guide as to the practical implementation of MLETR at a national level. On the next slide, we'll look at who has implemented MLETR and who is planning to implement it, and by when. So as you can see, a number of significant countries have already implemented MLETR-aligned reforms, with many more expected over the next 2 to 3 years. So where does Ukraine stand in relation to MLETR? Let's have a look on the next slide. In recent years, Ukraine has significantly advanced its legal and regulatory framework to accommodate digital documentation, electronic transactions, and related trust services. This modernization drive is largely motivated by Ukraine's broader efforts towards EU integration, improving its digital economy infrastructure, and streamlining both public and private sector operations. Laws have been passed which provide for the legal equivalence of electronic documents and their paper counterparts. Adopting principles of the EU's eIDAS regulation, different types of e-signatures and seals are now recognized. Digital invoicing is now accepted and regulated, including the use of electronic tax invoices. The government has also provided a single, secure digital platform, DR, for accessing public services and presenting official documents. Although not yet fully implemented, key policy initiatives and existing laws reflect MLETR's core principles. These alignments pave the way for potential future reforms that could incorporate MLETR more explicitly, especially as Ukraine continues to harmonize its legal environment with the European Union and international standards. Well, that's my high-level review of the digitalization of international trade and the development of Ukraine's regulatory environment completed. It just remains for me to provide you with the conclusions that I have made regarding the development of the digitalization of international trade. So, here are my conclusions. The digitalization of international trade will expand exponentially over the next few years, opening up new major opportunities as the ease of international trade increases, and the costs significantly decrease. MLETR is providing the necessary legal framework to allow this transition from paper-based systems and processes to electronic. The more countries that align with MLETR, the greater the network effect. Ukraine's legal landscape for digital documentation, e-signatures, and electronic invoices has evolved substantially, moving closer to international best practices, including those outlined by the UN. Although full formal adoption of MLETR is not yet in place, With existing frameworks and ongoing reforms, Ukraine is well positioned to continue improving the security, reliability, and acceptance of digital legal instruments in the near future. Well, thank you for listening to this presentation, and I hope that I have managed to convince you of the benefits and practicality of digitalized international trade. And I truly hope that you can benefit from these opportunities in the very near future. If you have any questions at any time about the digitalization of international trade, you know where to find me, or, more accurately, not me, but Oleksii.